Hello, my name is Caitríona Nic Aonghusa, and I'm really pleased to be giving a presentation today at the National Water Conference. I work in the Marine Institute. Our job is to provide scientific and technical advice to government to help inform policy and to support the sustainable development of Ireland's marine resources. We carry out a wide range of monitoring programmes and research to ensure that Ireland meets national and international legal requirements. These are things such as fisheries and environmental surveys. And an important function of the Marine Institute is to collect and disseminate information and data relating to all sorts of marine matters. The theme of the EPA Water Conference around integration of policy and practice is something that we are really striving for and working hard to achieve when it comes to the management of Ireland's marine resources. And from a practical and operational point of view, this is really vital to the Ireland's seas and coasts. I suppose I should start off by saying, why should we care about the ocean? It is the life support system for our planet. 71% of the Earth is covered by the ocean, and 50% of the air that we breathe comes from marine phytoplankton. Ireland, as you know, is an island nation, and 40% of the Irish population live within 5 kilometres of the coast. And according to figures that were published by NUIG, the Socioeconomic Marine Research Institute, the ocean economy is worth €6.2 billion, and there are more than 34,000 people employed in marine-related jobs in Ireland. And this here is the real map of Ireland. Our marine territory is almost 10 times that of our landmass. And I see this as an enormous responsibility. This is our collective wealth. It presents opportunities for development, but it also means that we have an inherent responsibility to protect it. And there's 3 things I'd like to talk to you about today. They are the complexities of managing Ireland's marine resources and how we're trying to implement an integrated approach operationally. And the final thing I want to discuss is how improved integration around these policies and practices has multiple benefits, not only for sustainable development and the protection of the marine environment, but also for things like climate change and biodiversity. Activities in Ireland, seas and coastal waters, they are currently managed through a very complex and evolving web of national and international legislation and sectoral policies. And these relate to developments of sectors such as fisheries, offshore renewables, tourism, shipping, and so on. And there are also climate and biodiversity drivers and international conventions such as OSPAR or UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. But my job today is not to go through all these various drivers. But I do really want to emphasize the scale of national and European and international policy drivers that there are. The Institute commissioned a foresight study last year, and as part of this, evidence base was collected where there were 200 policy drivers documented. Operationally, we're developing a more integrated approach to the implementation of multiple national and European obligations. And these relate to our monitoring, assessment and reporting for things such as the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, the Marine Spatial Planning Directive, the Common Fisheries Policy, the Water Framework Directive, Natura and OSPAR. And the approaches we're taking here will have added benefits for monitoring and reporting from the marine elements of climate and biodiversity obligations. Management of our marine resources requires a careful balance between the protection of the environment on one hand and the sustainable development of the marine resources. And if I could get my hands on a 3-way balance, I would add in the weight of social and cultural elements and the health benefits that people derive from the seas and the coasts. The single most important piece of legislation establishing integration of marine policies and practices in Ireland is the implementation of the Marine Spatial Planning Directive. The National Marine Planning Framework will be published tomorrow. This is Ireland's Marine Spatial Plan. It's our first Marine Spatial Plan, and it sets out how we will use and protect our seas over the next 20 years. The Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage is the competent authority, and the Marine Institute's role is to provide scientific support and advice to the department. The NMPF sits on top of a hierarchy of plans and sectoral policies, and it was written into primary legislation in Ireland in 2018. It means now that we have a joined-up policy approach to bring together marine-based human activities nationally and right down to the local level. And both climate and biodiversity are defined as overarching policies in the NMPF. But the NMPF is not only a document, it is part of an ongoing marine planning process that has been defined in the law, and it will be reviewed on a 6-year cycle. And this here is an illustration of that process. It started back in 2014 with the directive at a European level. Then there was a draft NMPF published in 2019. But there's two things I really want to mention about this process. The first is the need for ongoing data and knowledge and information to provide evidence for decision making. And the second is the involvement of stakeholders throughout the entire process. The Marine Spatial Planning Advisory Group is chaired by the Minister, and there were a wide series of local and national events. And DHLGLH held a 5-month public consultation. The benefits of an integrated approach to management of our marine resources is especially important for stakeholder participation and evidence. It's similar data needs, and there's crossover of stakeholders in the process. The NMPF does not set out zones for particular marine use. There's also new marine planning legislation in the pipeline. This will completely reform the marine planning system. It's a matter of weeks before the Maritime Area Planning Bill is published, the MAP Bill as it's now known as. Government is also establishing a new agency called MARA that will manage the existing state foreshore portfolio of leases and licenses. MARA will grant all maritime area consents and licenses and will ensure compliance and enforcement measures. This will set out forward planning procedures, and it will include spatial designations for specified areas and uses, and these are called designated marine area plans. This will set the groundwork for putting Ireland on a path to carbon neutrality by 2050. There's a new climate bill, and it aims to cut emissions by 51% by 2030, and that there will be a net zero emissions no later than 2050. And offshore renewable energy will be a major cornerstone for this clean energy transition. In the programme for government, there are 2 key targets. That is 5 gigawatts of power by 2030 off Ireland's eastern and southern coasts, and 30 gigawatts of offshore floating wind power in our deeper Atlantic waters by 2050. The Marine Strategy Framework Directive is the environmental pillar when it comes to the management of our marine resources. Its aim is to protect the marine environment across Europe, and it is analogous to the Water Framework Directive, but it extends out to the EEZ. On the map there, you'll see the light blue areas where the Water Framework Directive applies, and the red areas is the extent of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. The overarching goal of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive is to achieve good environmental status of our marine resources, and it's based on clean, healthy and productive seas and oceans where there's no decline in biodiversity and where the biodiversity is protected and there are no pollution effects. So the Marine Strategy Framework Directive is directly aligned to the overarching environmental and biodiversity policies in the NMPF. So you can see how there's opportunities for multiple benefits. Just to mention that we're in cycle 2 of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. We updated our assessment nationally for Ireland last year in June 2020, and we're currently working to develop our monitoring programs, and that will be complete by August 2021. Implementation of an integrated approach to the management of Ireland's marine resources is not without its challenges, and it's certainly not easy. There's an innate silo effect, and it's important that we continue to improve the coordination of marine management. A couple of years ago, Kelly et al. Published an analysis of the challenges associated with an integrated approach to management of our marine resources. And even the term integration is a bit ambiguous. Our coastal waters are socioeconomically and ecologically important, and there are competing and conflicting users. There's also a fragmentation around our governance arrangements. And stakeholder integration, of course, is difficult. If you're talking about sectoral policy integration, it's even more complex, and there's very few examples of best practices. There are many issues in the marine environment that differ from land use planning, and land-sea integration is challenging. Management of coastal environments, it really requires an extensive range of knowledge and skills and resources. So you can see it is very complex with a lot of uncertainty. Many marine policy drivers require an integrated ecosystem-based approach to marine management. It's mentioned in the Common Fisheries Policy, the Marine Spatial Planning Directive, the Water Framework Directive, and the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And I just want to show you an example of how a colleague of mine carried out an analysis that illustrates the complexities of this. Now, don't worry about the detail, but it's just to give you a sense of the complexities. This diagram here shows the marine ecosystem and the human activities that happen in our seas. And then you have this web of national and international legislation that applies to marine protection. And here is an illustration of the marine food web. So what about their interactions and how they interact together? This here illustrates the interactions of the activities and pressures in the marine environment to trace their cause and effects. And believe it or not, this is actually called a horrendogram. Up here at the top, you have the activities happening in the marine environment. Here in the middle line, you have the pressures that they exert. And down here at the bottom, you have the habitats that they are impacting. So for example, if we pull out the fishing activity, this red box here, it causes these pressures that are highlighted black: abrasion, bycatch, litter, and so on. And they impact on these environments. If you think about it, there are more than almost 2,000 different interactions between the pressures, the activities, and the habitats. In saying that, improved integration of policies and practices has multiple benefits for sustainable development and protection of the marine environment, the biodiversity, and the climate. It is leading to better coordination around evidence gathering, tools, and the outcomes of implementation of these policies. Operationally, it means the use of common assessments and monitoring approaches for responding to the different drivers. It also means an improved communication and better interactions with stakeholders. We can reuse monitoring methods, tools, and data, and there's a principle of collect once, use many times. If the data is collected for one particular application, it can be used for delivery of another. For example, if data is collected for the Common Fisheries Policy, it will respond to the needs of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive reporting. At an operational level, we're harmonizing our approach so that marine science and data are delivering for multiple legislative needs, and management of marine resources is evidence-led. An important part of the jigsaw is the integration of data for management of marine resources. Providing the data to implement an evidence-led decision-making process requires three things. The first is that the relevant data and information are available. The second is that we ensure that the data are reliable and meet a certain level of quality. The quality of the data used by decision makers should meet the highest standards. And we also want to reuse and integrate existing data sources. With data availability, it's really important that we understand what data is available. And the questions we're continually asking ourselves are, what data do we have about the Irish exclusive economic zone? What data don't we have? Does the data exist and how can it be accessed? And if the data does not exist, what is needed in terms of the time and resources to create it? In relation to data quality, the Marine Institute has international accreditation for our data management processes. And this means that the data management systems are in place and high quality marine data is available to reuse. The data sets comply with the relevant licensing conditions and data governance procedures. And this gives users the confidence in the outputs we produce and provides reliable evidence to support planning decisions. A huge part of the evidence base is data integration from disparate sources and organizations. And this is just a snapshot of some of the contributors to the data collation exercise that we undertook to support the NMPF over the last few months. Marine data are available on the Marine Institute's data catalogue and the Atlas. The Atlas is a single source describing what data are available. It's continually updated and it's a reliable source of metadata. The Atlas itself is a visualization tool, and these are hubs for marine spatial products. The digital tool that we are developing with the Department of Housing is another project that we're undertaking, and this tool will be used for maritime area decisions and will make relevant data available through that as well. So to wrap up, I just want to restate what we're doing. We're delivering integrated quality data, services and products that would enable government and decision makers to achieve a sustainable ocean economy, protect and manage our marine ecosystems and meet our European obligations. Thank you.